and welcome to Homemakers Radio. Hope you get a lot done while you listen. I have quite a bit of material to read to you and talk to you about today. And the first thing we do when we come here to listen is to make sure that you're dressed and ready for work. So that's the top priority of the Homemakers Radio, is to get your appearance ready so that you feel like you're going to be doing something important and feel like you have some kind of a goal. And if you want to leave a comment or you want to watch this in a better atmosphere, please go to the link that I provide and you can see the video there or listen there, which has a nicer page and less distractions than the YouTube. I don't have any comments on the YouTube channel, but you can comment there if you like. And if you don't want to go through Google and all the things it takes to comment, you may email me, and my email address is on the left. But before you go, I'd like to share with you one of my cups. This is not a teacup. I don't call it a teacup, but it came with a set. It's just a little glass cup, and we like to use these for in the autumn and winter for our hot punch, which we make out of apple juice and cinnamon and heat it on top of the burner and serve it up with a ladle in these, and they take the heat pretty well and they're dishwasher safe. And they came in a box like this at Ross. That's like a reject store here, and this is what it looks like on the inside. I've kept the box all these years because there's no better place to keep them, and we only use them seasonally. Unless I'm having something, I can serve cold punch in them also, or for special occasions. There are 6. I noticed that the price on it was, I must have got it around maybe 20 years ago, and there was a price on it here. Goodness, can't see it right now. Can you believe this? $5.99 for 6 of these cups, and it's lasted me all this time. So I'll talk to you a little bit about why the appearance is so important and why you must get dressed. Now, I understand if you get up and the first thing you do are your exercises, which I'm learning more about. I want to wear my exercise clothes to exercise in, and they're so comfortable and it's so easy just to get up from the exercising and go and put something away, and then there's something else. And start sweeping and grab a rag and start wiping, and it's so easy to spend your whole day in those exercise clothes. And at first it won't seem so bad, but it can do some damage in demoralizing you and making you not feel like this is something really special to do. So today I would like to talk to you about getting dressed and why your appearance is important. For one thing, now that so many people are home and they're maybe earning money from home or from at home, socializing from home, all of their interaction with other people is on the media, is on your computer, on your phone. And so what dressing does, what dressing up does, is it makes a statement about how you feel about life and what you like, and is something other than the media, something other than social media. It's something that is really personal. And you know how social media, how fickle it is. You know, people can get all inflamed over something that you've said, or you can get things removed on YouTube or on Twitter. You can get it all removed. Well, I don't have any of that. But one of the powers that you have is getting dressed. And if you want to become less dependent on the media for receiving your message, dressing is a wonderful thing to do, because you don't even have to talk. Your statement is in your clothing. And of course, people who dress in a crazy way are also making a statement. They've known that for a long time. But sometimes we forget that we too can make a statement with our clothes. And so nobody can delete us in the way we dress. And so I like to dress up. After I've done my exercises, I might take a shower and get dressed in something pretty, put an apron on over it, and it can't be, if someone doesn't like it, they can't do anything about it. And so I just like to compare that a little bit to make dressing is your reality statement. It's your statement in real life to real people. as to how you feel about life and what you're going to do with your, how special it is to you. I believe clothing is something that can be easily used as an uplifting thing. And sometimes, when my kids feel a little off or a little cranky, I would just say, let's go change your clothes. Let's put something fresh and new on. And that is so helpful. It just creates a different mood. And when you've studied things like the Victorian era or royalty, and believe it or not, in the Victorian era, which was from the time of the birth of Queen Victoria till around her death around 1903, I think it was. You think of it as more of a royal era, but it was also a common people's era too. There were middle class people, there were poor people. They had a life too, and the way that they lived was important to them. But it's very interesting to study how people would change their clothes for certain events. Even in a humble home, they might think that getting dressed for dinner was important. It was important to the homemaker because she created that meal, and she didn't like people to come to the table without being washed, without their hair being combed. We always used to wash our hands and face and comb our hair before we came to dinner. Even out on that rough homestead in the wilderness in Alaska, I was just thinking about that the other day, how important that was for us not to come to the table with dirty hands or dirty fingernails. And I believe that we were kept fairly healthy that way. And also that we had a respectful attitude towards mealtime, and we honored it more because it was special. It was so important to us, and that ceremony, that eating was so important to us that we had to wash for it, maybe even change our shirt. I thought that was really something compared to today. So if you have not got dressed, then I think it's really important that you hang up and go get dressed and call me back later when you're dressed. And get dressed up as though your home is a wonderful place of employment, that you are not just a place of employment, but a residing place where you are residing peacefully over it, where you are the lady of the house and you're creating a climate, you're creating an atmosphere by the way that you dress. Can you imagine wanting to watch a movie? Like, I know some of you are really fond of the Jane Austen type movies, but can you imagine watching a new one that was just produced and everybody's dressed, nobody cares what they wear, they're all dressed like in rags, and how unappealing that would be. But if you have to make conversation with people, I think it's also important that you have a good appearance. And it's kind of disappointing, sometimes when you are talking to someone and they maybe expected you or invited you over and they didn't bother with themselves, maybe didn't even comb their hair. So we want to present a good image of homemaking. Many of you are home now, maybe never even intended to be homemakers. Well, you want to present a good image to those around you, even if those around you are your grown children or your growing children. They need to have a good image of their mother. And I think that it is interesting to hear older people say that they never saw their mother wearing and they'll mention some garment or some outfit that you see commonly today, and they said they never saw their mother in one of those. I think that's really interesting. The other thing I would like to talk to you about today is hospitality. Now, I've been just crazy busy lately because I've been getting ready for a company, and all of our descendants came over, and I won't tell you how many, because we have a governor in Oregon named Kate Brown that has supposedly limited the amount of people you can have in your house at the same time. And I quickly discerned that I would have had to leave out half my family. And which ones was I going to leave out? And I would have had to show hospitality twice on my husband's birthday. I would have had to have two separate, so I didn't do it. And I won't tell you how many were there, but there were a lot. And I had a lot of sheets and towels hanging on the line for several days, and I have had just a big rush to get things back in order so that they might come again. And so I have been really crazy busy, and I thought about, while I was kind of looking after everyone, about hospitality and how you can become more at ease with it. there will be certain things that might irritate you about hospitality. Maybe people will move things, or maybe people will stand, blocking you, and you can't look past at someone else, and these kind of things. So what I decided this time was I was going to observe the things that weren't working out, like the seating arrangements, just in the lounge room, the front room, people sitting around, and the way they would have their backs to anybody. I removed any chairs and put them elsewhere, which would tempt someone to sit in front of someone else where they could not converse easily with everyone in the room. And that really, really helps. But every now and then you get a smart person who just wants to move his chair closer to somebody else, and he doesn't realize that he's turning his back on someone else. So what I did was just about made it impossible to move anything, because we, of course, had everything so cramped in there that it was just about impossible. And the other thing that I did to keep, I couldn't keep them out of the kitchen. They all wanted to be in the kitchen, especially the men. The men all they wanted to stand up in the kitchen. And they were all in the kitchen, and they just are more comfortable in there, I think. And maybe the light's different, the smells are different, but they all wanted to be in the kitchen. So I thought it might be nice to have some kind of higher chair, stools in the kitchen for them to sit on. I just kind of watched to see how everything was going, and then to keep people from crowding the kitchen too much, if they wanted some snack or something like that, I took a tray of food around every now and then and just offered it to everyone. Plus I had my coffee and tea stations all over the house, so they could just get up and fix whatever they wanted. I tried to remember who liked what and what kind of flavors and put that out. So just think, if you will just observe. Now, a lot of people will think that hospitality can make them very nervous, but you always become more comfortable as you practice. So the first time might seem rather rattling, and you'll think, oh, I'm never going to do that again. Then you start to think how you could made it work better, and just observe. I also observed what kind of food they rejected and what kind of food they liked and what we ran out of the most. And then as you start to practice more, you start to feel more comfortable with it. So you've got to start somewhere, and the first time might not be as much fun. That's why I say start with one person. And so we'll move on from hospitality to homemaking. And what I would suggest you do for homemaking, now a lot of people have suggested this on their housekeeping sites and their homemaking sites. I like to carry a clipboard around, and I'll go through the house according to the room, and I'll create a master list, and I will list which room it is, and the master list will just be things that need to be done, things that need to be changed, things that need to be fixed, things that need to be improved or remodeled or gotten rid of or replaced. Any job from any room, but I will separate it into categories of the rooms. And I enjoy doing that. You don't have to do it all at once, but it's nice to have your clipboard with your master list. Now this little one, I get these at the dollar store. This is your daily list. This is what you do when you get up in the morning. You might want to do it the night before. Maybe you feel better to do it the next day because your mind is fresher. Is to do your daily work. And your daily work is generally considered by everyone as making sure the kitchen is clean, catching up on the laundry, bathroom clean, picking up clutter, groceries. Now I order everything. I've been ordering my any kind of shopping that I need. I've been ordering, or Mr. S, he goes out still, and so he takes my list with him, and he's very good at picking things out, and he's able to phone me to discern whether or not it's the thing that I want. So I've thought that I had a little more time, and what I have discovered is I'm finding more and more and more to do at home, and I have not left the property since July the 4th. And I decided to stay home, not because of a shutdown, not because of a lockdown, and not even because I don't want to wear a mask, but because it would have been a perfect time and a perfect excuse to stay home, because everyone would have thought that those were the reasons, and I could get away with it. But if it was not for this time of life, with all this happening, I probably would not have been able to do it. But this was perfect because now I can stay home. And before, I have tried it before, and I've always been fascinated with these videos that I watch every now and then where, you know, someone spends a year alone in the desert or a year alone in the wilderness, and what they do from day to day, and they'll do YouTube videos from day to day. And I've always been fascinated with that and wondered what it would be like to spend a year alone of course I'm not alone, but a year at home and not go out. However, I'm not real isolated. I live in the manse, and there's a little path to the church building, and I have a acreage around me. I live on farmland. I can look out, and I get plenty of exercise, and I also have so much to do that I haven't even noticed. I have not even missed the shops. I have not missed them. I was getting a little bored with them. You would think in the year 2020 that the shops and the stores and the eating places would, oh goodness, they need to redecorate, and they need to redo their shops, and they need to get better merchandise in, because I lost my interest in it. So I don't miss it. I don't miss going out at all, and I don't miss having to find a parking spot, and don't miss the gas bill. So I decided that I would stay home. I just want to be an experiment, and I wondered what would happen to my mind, you know. But actually, I'm feeling sharper. I can remember things more easily, and I don't have so much negative in my life from the almost every other day experience of having to go out and deal with the public. And so a lot of people said, oh, you're just like the ostrich, you're burying your head in the sand. Well, an ostrich does not bury its head in the sand, so do a study on ostriches before you jump to conclusions. But and I'm feeling healthier, and my skin is clearing up a little bit. I've had skin problems for years and years, but so half of the anxiety that I normally feel in my life is gone. I would say probably half of it. And so I'd like to talk to you a little bit about some of the things that I've been doing that I've noticed. I don't know if they're connected, but I've noticed that I don't have so much tension in my life. Number one is that I don't listen to the news anymore. And number two is I exercise every day, even if it's 4 or 5 minutes. I think that it balances my brain. Another thing that I do, and I know what you're going to say, but another thing to do is I talk to myself. So when I put something away, I say, okay, I have put this here in the side of this green envelope, and it's sitting right there, and I did it Monday morning. And I do it out loud. I say it out loud because I've noticed that thinking it and trying to remember does not work, but saying it out loud brings the noise back to my ears, and my ears are intricately connected to my brain, and then I can find it again because I told myself out loud. Now, in the olden days, now some of you oldies will remember this, people did used to talk to themselves. They used to talk to themselves and tell themselves where they left something or what they were doing or what they needed to do. Until, I believe, around the time we arrived in school in the 1950s, they weren't letting us talk to ourselves anymore. We couldn't talk to ourselves while we were doing our work, you know, sitting there at a desk doing our work. We used to talk to ourselves at home. But you were no longer allowed to talk to yourself while you wrote or while you did anything, because you couldn't think out loud. You weren't allowed to think out loud. And this is one of the things that's wrong with the public school system. And I'm so glad that I discovered homeschooling, because it's important to think out loud. And many people think they're just losing their minds because they cannot remember what they've done with something, or where they put something, or who they were talking to, or what they were planning. They were just planning something, and they just left their mind. But we used to talk to ourselves. I don't know if you can remember that. It's probably been so long since we've been allowed to talk to ourselves. But that also helps with memory. And like I said, the sound of the voice activates the hearing, and the hearing the mind. And you will find that a lot of people that have lost their hearing also tend to be more forgetful, or even be closer to dementia. I really think it's important to keep your hearing healthy, and you can't if you live in silence all the time. So I think it's really important to talk to yourself if no one else is there. And I'm sure Mr. S would not like me to constantly run into his office and ask him questions all the time just to hear another voice. But I also have been using the YouTube. I go to YouTube videos and I find things that I like. And while I'm working, I might listen to something that I like, and I like to hear what other people are doing. And one of the things that I do is I go to the exercises and find one that I like, maybe a 5-minute exercise. And then I also like the videos that have sounds in them. And there are some people that actually go with sound equipment, really good, high-quality sound equipment, and they will record a babbling brook or an ocean or a rainstorm or a wind or anything like that. And then they post it, and I really like that. And that's something that I like to have. It kind of reduces anxiety too. At night, if you have trouble sleeping, I would really strongly recommend you go to any of these soothing sound recordings on YouTube, and they often have a video in the background too to go with the sound, but you'll find yourself calming right away with that, and it's absolutely beautiful. How much time do we actually spend listening to things like that? So it's really nice when people put that up there for us. And then another thing that I like to go and watch is to find an art class that's just a video, that's instructional video that's already there, and try to follow along with it. I like all different kinds. I like still life, florals, scenery. And one of the things that I discovered recently was one that I really want to do. I've watched it to see if I might be able to muster up the talent, and that is a rainy day. This guy has put an art video up on how to paint rain. I'd really like to understand how to do that. So if you are having trouble with any kind of anxiety, and I feel like it's not just the homemaker that often has that, but since people are spending more time away from work, where you have everything outlined for you, where you have everything listed for you, where you do things according to what the rules are, now you have to start forming good judgment. Now you start having to decide for yourself and become self-employed, and that can create some unnerving anxiety when you think that it's all going to be up to you how things are done. And I experienced this when I first started homeschooling my children back in the 80s. Was, oh, okay, now what do I do? Do I imitate the entire public school system and make them sit at a desk and do so many lessons a day? Or do I go along with life and try to teach common sense? And I chose the latter. And but I did have books, and I will show you some of them today. So I have some challenges today that I want to talk to you about too. First of all, in anything, if you have anxiety, and the reason I bring this up is because a lot of people have said, what do you do to reduce anxiety? And even those that have said they've cut off the bad news and they've cut off anything that bothers them, that they don't listen to everything, there are still some things that you can do to reduce anxiety if it still occasionally comes. And that is exercise before bed, have a comforting bath, good reading material, and a nice movie before bed. You should be able to relax and be free of the anxiety. And in everything, I stretched myself a little bit further as I have had this time to stay home. I started out thinking, well, I have oodles of time now. I don't have to get in that car and go somewhere. And I think a lot of homemakers feel that way. If you are watching this, I hope that you will stop that and get up and go try to get something done. Do you have a box of stuff that needs to be sorted? Do you have bookshelves that need to be cleaned? Do you have a drawer that needs to be cleaned? Do you have food that needs to be processed? Do you have laundry that needs to be done? Do you have a floor that needs to be swept? You could be doing that while you listen. And I can just keep you company and not get in your way. And one of the things I like about these kind of classes is that I don't have to go anywhere, and you don't have to either, and spend an enormous amount of time away from home. And it doesn't cost anything. So this is just the ideal way, and this is the era of the internet, and I think it's nice that we can all use it. So one of the challenges today is to put away something that you've avoided putting away. And I am telling you, it's such a mental problem with me. I have shelves, top shelves, that have had just boxes of stuff stored up there for years, and I'm thinking that shelf is looking a little overdone. I'm going to have to get those down, and for years I just left it up there. And then one day I decided that I would challenge myself to put away something that I've been looking at for a long time and clean it up. You know, it looked terrible. There just lots, it must have been 20 boxes up there of things. It took me like 5 minutes to get them down, and another maybe 25 minutes to find a better place for them, to sort through them, and to put some of the others on the giveaway table outside. And it was so simple. It's just a feeling that that's going to take me so long. I'm going to have to put aside a whole day, have a whole day off when I don't have to cook or when I don't have to clean. Some of that is a lot easier. And when we first started out with Sidetracked Home Executives, which is now Fly Lady, they said that if you're having trouble and you're passing up things that need to be done, or you're not putting things away, put something away and time yourself. And then you realize it's not that big of a deal. Just because it looks piled up doesn't mean it might take hours to put it away. I was shocked at how easy it was to put it all away. And now I have on that shelf just one thing, and it is a pretty basket full of the artificial flowers that I use over and over. That's all I need up there. And so the other thing about homemaking that I want to graduate to is your clipboard. How nice that is to carry that around. This is your master list, and this is your little daily list. When you have finished, this is your challenge. Another challenge. One challenge is to put something away you've been avoiding. And the other challenge is, if you've done everything on your daily list, all those things that have to be done every day, go to your master list and find one thing and do it and check it off. My master list is so complicated. It's got things on it like paint bedroom. I don't think I could do that, but I could get out my little can of paint in the bucket, and I could maybe paint a little bit and put it all away. And so I knew a lady once who would just go, and if she had a painting project like some shelves, she would just go get her little paint can out, and she just bought the smaller cans, and she would paint a part of that shelf, and then she'd clean her brush and put it away. And that way she eventually got it done. Instead of waiting to think, I have to have a whole day set apart to do this whole room, she would just do a little bit at a time. I thought that was quite clever. So now I also want to go through some books with you. And I wanted to warn you about this, about negative attitudes. You know, I always like to talk about people at the end of the video, but today I want to talk about just us. And that is the attitude of I can't do that. And you have to stop saying that. You know, I noticed when ladies get together, sometimes one of them will say something, and they'll say, well, I don't do that. Well, I don't like that. Well, I don't have to do that. Well, I prefer, and they always say the opposite, or they always contradict, and they think they're making really nice conversation, but it can rankle people. And so you have to stop doing that to yourself too. The I can't attitude, or I won't do that attitude, is to stretch yourself and don't get shut down. People talk about the quote shut down, but you know what? Your mind doesn't have to be shut down. And you can, before any of this stuff happened in the year 2020, there were a lot of people that were already mentally shut down and depressing the way they talked. They were already that way. And they also were shut down in their body. They didn't exercise, and they were just kind of getting poor health and out of shape. They were already that way. And in their intellect, they were shut down because they would not learn something new, and they would not increase their knowledge or stretch their minds, stretch their bodies, stretch their talents, they wouldn't bother. They're just like happy to be upset and miserable all the time, and they wouldn't improve their attitude and their speech. There were a lot of books that came out in the 1960s called positive attitude books, and there was a lot of negativity against them. There were a lot of people that didn't like them, and even some of the ministers and churches didn't like the positive thinking books because in their view it did not properly portray how God wants his people to behave. And it was the one thing they were warning us about them was that you can't just think something into existence. You can't just be positive about something and everything will work out for you. And we understand that. But one of the reasons that people start talking about being more positive and less contradictory and less argumentative is when the country kind of reaches an era where everybody is doing that and it's bringing everyone down and they don't have a vision of happiness for the future. That's not healthy, and it's not a good way to bring up children. The next generation needs parents and people to be can-doers, to be able to think in a I can do it way. And if you cannot think that way, then to me, you're half alive. It is hard to be alive. I've noticed that people that are constantly contradicting, constantly arguing, are also not very healthy. And because your happiness and your eagerness to be able to accomplish, to be able to reach goals, even if they're just personal goals, like keeping up with the housework. People that are negative in their attitude was, well, I'll believe that when I see it, or I just don't see it. They also suffer in their bodies too. They suffer from being very, for some reason, your mind, when it's cheerful and happy, helps your body to be healthier. And I honestly think it helps your digestion. It helps everything. It helps your heartbeat. So don't get the can't-do attitude. Don't get shut down in your mind. Don't get shut down in your intellect. Don't get shut down in your body. And never shut down your relationship with Christ. Don't lose your faith in Christ. Never say, I'm disappointed and delusioned and I'm, losing my faith. Because that is, remember Marilla said to Anne said something about being in total despair. And Marilla said, to despair is to turn your back on God. And so in a way she was right. So I stretched myself a little bit and I got that shelf cleaned up and I was so amazed that I was able to do it. However, I think it all began with two things. One is deciding to stay home, to see how long I could stay home without getting in that car and going to get the groceries and going to the post office. And I started ordering everything. And the other thing was the exercises, because the exercise gave me the mental stamina to do it and the physical stamina. It's really hard to think you can do something if your body is not going to cooperate. And a lot of times people get very depressed because their bodies are so out of shape. So I would suggest you spend 5 minutes on exercise or more. I'm way up there now, kids. I have graduated. I started out with this 1 pound weight of, it's tropical fruit. It's past its prime, but I decided to save it for a weight. So I had one in each hand, and for some of the exercises. And as you know, I'm following, I'm using the Fabulous 50s exercises. I believe she's in Australia. I like some of her exercises to do, and I turn off the volume sometimes so that I could listen to something else while I'm exercising. But I graduated to the 2 pound cans, and this is baked beans. And I wanted to tell you something about these. Now this is 2 pounds, so now I'm supposed to have really strong arms. Maybe I'll lose that little arm flap here if I keep doing this. But I have to warn you about something. If you're going to use baked beans, either take the label off or cover it with brown paper, because I had this and I was looking at the recipe on the back and there's a great big juicy hamburger there. And she said at the end of the walking exercise, you've used up 350 calories. And the hamburger was 350 calories, but I went and made the hamburger anyway because I've been looking at it the whole time I was walking. That was so disappointing. So you're either going to have to cover the recipe for the hamburger, but that was really, homemade hamburgers are like the old-fashioned ones. They're really, really good. So I just wanted to warn you about that. So put something away that you've been avoiding. Exercise for 5 minutes. And do your daily work and find one thing off of your master list. If you don't have a master list, just create that. You might go to flylady.com and go look at what her monthly and weekly exercise homemaking jobs are. I don't like to get it in the email because there's too many advertisements for cleaning products in it, and I have to eliminate so much. I just go to her site and look at it. But while I'm talking about her, there's the lady that bought the company and changed it to Fly Lady, wrote a book called From Chaos to Clean. From Chaos to Clean. And so she has all these ways that you can get out of trouble once you. Now, a lot of you have never been in any deep trouble with your homemaking, but some of us who've had other things to do, and also church, attending church and doing all the other activities, could not, or had to be away, could not always keep up, and found ourselves behind. And it's easy to get behind if your family starts growing and there's other activities that you have to do. So this is a way to get back on track. And she starts out with 31 days, and day 1 is in this book. And so she tells you what to do. Shine your sink before bed. Make sure your sink is empty. Now, she will say, fill your sink up and put some bleach in it. But I can't do that. I'm on a septic system out here in the country, and that's not good for your septic. And you have to have the right pH balance for that. So you cannot put bleach in your sink, or put bleach in your laundry, or put anything that goes down the drain. Now, you can use bleach, but you have to pour it somewhere else, outside or something, but not in your drain. And she has your first assignment here, and she tells you what to do. And I like it that they started out with, and I wanted to tell you about some of these books. They have covers on them that aren't just my style. I have a certain thing I like, but there's always some kind of cartoony, wacky thing on them. So I've been going through my old scrap paper books that I didn't get around to using, and I just tear a piece out and I make a cover for the book, and that way I have the books in the bookshelves, and they look really pretty. So she starts out, and she has 31 days here for you to read. If you feel like you want to follow that might be something you want to get. Chaos to Clean in 31 Easy Baby Steps. And she warns you about mixing cleaners. You don't want to mix your Comet with your Windex and other ammonia-based cleaners, but I don't use any of those. I've been using vinegar. And when I have to tell you, I got a good grade in something. I had this septic appointment. After you have to get your septic checked every 3 years, and they test it and to see if it's good pH balance and if it's healthy. And he gave me such a good grade, and he said, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. And I know it's because I quit putting detergent down my drains and my sinks. I absolutely only use biodegradable detergents with no phosphates, and I use vinegar in my laundry. I use vinegar to clean everything. I have it in a spray bottle, and I clean my sinks and everything with it. And also I'm breathing better with not so many detergents going on in the house. And I wish I had known about the vinegar many years ago, and I did, but I somehow let it lapse. And I wished I had known more about how good that was. I bet everybody would have, and my family would have felt better. So that is one book. It's called Chaos to Clean, that I wanted to talk to you about. And you know what? It wouldn't hurt to have homeschoolers read this, even the boys, because it gives them the idea of how things work in the home and how they should work in the home. And one thing that I like about her book that's different from Sidetracked Home Executives by Pam and Peggy Bryce, who wrote it in the 70s, is that she starts with your kitchen. And the idea is to get the kitchen cleaned up, because that's a harder job, and it will make it easier to go and clean up other things. Whereas Pam and Peggy Bryce had you clean up the front room, the living room, and work from the door clockwise around and save the kitchen till last. Well, everybody found that by saving the kitchen till last, we often were too exhausted to do the kitchen, just go to bed and wake up with the mess the next morning. So she starts out with the kitchen, and that's really, really good. And these are the scrapbook papers that I've been going through everything, and these were the ones that I had left, and so I decided to use them to cover some books with. And there's a page that I'm going to use on a book, and it also keeps the books clean. But I also, some of the covers on some of the books I didn't care for. So here's another book that I have been reading that I don't know if it concerns anybody, but it was in my bookshelf, and I wanted to be sure that I included this today. So I'm just homeschooling some of you older people so that you can say you were homeschooled. But all homeschooling is finding out how to live, and it doesn't mean you have to have books, but it's just learning, and it's just stretching your intellect, and stretching your talents, and stretching your, like for instance, maybe you've got an old piano sitting in your house, but you don't know how to play the piano. You could probably find a book on how to play the piano and just try a few notes. And there are some people that won't do anything. They won't start with the baby steps. That's what this book here is all about, starting with baby steps, some little thing that you can clean. And I have often said, if you have lack of motivation, her theory is pretty good. You're just really in a mess. Just reach over and take a second and move something. Move something on your end table. Straighten something out. Pick up a piece of trash, and you can get your motivation back by movement. And one of the things that you can do is, when you start to feel anxiety, use that as a trigger. Use that as a signal to go do something, to do some useful work in the house. It doesn't have to be anything involved. It doesn't have to be anything big. You could say, well, instead of saving wiping down the bathroom sink till tomorrow, I'll just get up and go clean that. And if the anxiety returns, get up and go do something else. And pretty soon you might find the anxiety abating a bit. Well, now this book here is called Adrenal Fatigue, and I don't know if anyone's heard of it, and it's the 21st Century Stress Syndrome. What it is and how you can recover your energy, your immune resistance, your vitality, and your enjoyment of life. Now, this is an interesting book, and it's published. I'm trying to think what the publisher is. It looks like it's a recent book, I think. Usually has a date 2018, okay, but it's in its 29th printing, so I'm not sure what the first one was. I'll just read a little bit out of about adrenal fatigue. Are you tired, worn out, just can't regain your normal energy no matter what you do or how many doctors you visit? You're about to read an important and badly needed book. Despite an absolute flood of health books in the last decade, there have been none that describe the uncommon but mostly overlooked problem of weak adrenal gland function in such a thorough but understandable way. The answers you're looking for may be well here. Adrenal fatigue, technically called hypoadrenia and hypoadrenalism, has been one of our most prevalent and yet rarely diagnosed conditions for the last 50 years. Despite being described in medical texts in the 1800s, and despite the development of the first really effective treatment in the 1930s, most conventional physicians are unaware the problem even exists. Adrenal fatigue may be overcome and energy restored. As with many other problems, recovery starts with making the right diagnosis and uncovering as many of the factors that cause it to occur as we possibly can. Only then can we make and carry out a plan that will help us recover. And so it says here, there is a warning. If you discover through reading this book that you may be suffering from adrenal fatigue, you'll need to do most of the work to achieve a recovery. There are lifestyle changes to be made, diets to be altered forever, vitamins, minerals, and herbs to swallow, tests to take and understand, and much patience required. Even attitude and relationships sometimes need to be adjusted. While a knowledgeable physician can give guidance and coaching, she or he can't find that for all of us. But all the effort will be worth it. If you have adrenal fatigue and follow the program, it's extremely likely that you will recover. Now, one of the things that I noticed is that I used to be always tired. And before this this sort of global thing that's going on, the so-called shutdown and everything, I found myself suffering from a couple of things. One was tiredness and lack of motivation, and sometimes every now and then just kind of a little sort of anxiety that things were not quite right, something was wrong, and maybe some sleeplessness too. But I found some of the things that helped me. One of them was the exercise, and the other was staying home, not having to go out and constantly be challenged to constantly watch what I say and watch where I go and where I park and everything. It just takes a lot. It just took a lot out of me, and I'm just going to see how long it takes. Now, I did get in my car the other day and I drove it around my own property, and I drove it up to the mailbox and I drove it back and then I reparked it just to keep in practice. But you know, I just don't miss it. Don't miss being in it. And I don't miss long trips. I don't miss it. I am finally getting caught up with things that used to bother me for a long time. So I want to read a few things about some of the nutrients in this book, what to eat and drink. Okay? Energy from food. Oh, let me just go up here to start out here. It says, if you suffer from adrenal fatigue, you will do best combining fat, protein, and starchy carbohydrates at every meal and every snack. Your body converts fats, proteins, and starch or carbohydrates into a blood sugar called glucose. Despite the fact that your body uses glucose for fuel, eating sugar or sugary foods and fruit juices is hard on your body. It makes your blood sugar rise too fast and subsequently fall too low, leaving your body starving for fuel again. Now, it goes into great length about that, but I'm going to go to this one called to salt or not to salt. And it says, the majority of people with adrenal fatigue have low blood pressure, not high. Yes, I have low blood pressure. My daughter has low blood pressure. For over 70 years, it has been known that people with Addison's disease benefit from the addition of sodium to their diet. But then he talks about salt and the kind of salt that you should have. If you're buying commercial products, remember, prepared products have the wrong kind. Most of them have the wrong kind of salt in them. It has a commercial sodium. And your bread would have salt in it, and your mayonnaise and your condiments all have a salt in it, but it doesn't mean that it's good for you. Sea salt is a good source of salt. It contains more trace minerals than regular table salt. And some of the most nutrient-rich sources of salt are kelp and a preparation of salt and sesame seeds. To improve the nutrient content of sea salt, it's a good idea to mix it half and half with kelp. I don't think I would like that, but anyway, I'm just reading this to you. And of course, he tells you that not everything is going to suit everybody. So it talks about what makes adrenal fatigue worse. I think most people feel it right after they've had a baby too. It takes a lot out of you. It talks about what proteins are and how they work along with other foods. And but I think in everything it's good not to get too fanatical about food. Now, somebody in my family said, Mom, why don't you just do an entire video sometime on food? Because I can remember back in the olden days, like probably some of you can, that food we just ate so that we could live, and no one thought too much about it. And the meal times, especially in summer, were consumed with talking about the food. And they would say things. It reminds me of the movie The Magic of Ordinary Days. Remember when they were eating at the table of, oh goodness, I can't even think who the characters' names were, but they were saying that the green beans were particularly good this year, and the corn tasted good, and were they going to plant some more next year? They're just really enjoying this food that they had grown. And that was the way it was, you know, on the farms. We would go to visit a relative that lived on a farm, and they would serve things from the farm, and we would talk about it, and we'd talk about what it tastes like and how good it was, and we would just constantly talk about the food, and we ate it with gusto, and we ate it without any guilt, and we weren't fat. But then towards the I believe early 1970s, late 1960s, a lot of the food that was processed started to make us not feel good or make us fat, so people started to become more weight conscious, and then they developed the calorie system and the gram system, and then everyone was warned, you know, that they shouldn't get fat, and so people became very concerned about it. But I can remember growing up without all this stuff about the food. We didn't fear it as much as people fear it now. We could sit there and eat a lot of things. I remember the outdoor meals we had. You know, you built a campfire, and in the summer you would make, you know, cook things over it and eat it, and there was always lots of it, and people ate it, and they didn't worry about, you know, it didn't seem to make them as sick. And of course, this was long before the GMA foods and the things that were added in the processed foods. And so when I shop for food, I go to the outer aisles of all the markets and buy everything that's fresh, and very little, very little canned, boxed, or bottled. I try to keep the fresh food in the house. Of course, that doesn't help you if you can't get out. You are going to have some things stocked that are preserved, and that's okay. But even with, back in the olden days, even though we had a very bad diet in the winter, we lived on the canned goods in the winter, they weren't full of additives in those days. They weren't full of additives, and they weren't genetically modified, and were often from places that you knew, you know, local farms. And and then if you go back to, you can start your food exploration and your food study from the book of Genesis. Just start there, you know, about the Garden of Eden and what might have been in it, and then the fruit that was not to be eaten. And it starts out talking about how some things Adam and Eve were not supposed to touch this one particular tree, the fruit on this one particular tree. And it's a good lesson, I think, because just because something looks good doesn't mean we should eat it. And so that's a good thing to remember. And that means you'd have to have some kind of knowledge of foods and what foods you should have and what foods you shouldn't. And then we go on to other references. You can go all through the Bible and find references to food and what it was used for. And remember, when Joseph went to Egypt, the big thing was the famine that was going on, and so his big job was to make sure they had enough food stored. That was absolutely brilliant, wasn't it? If you study the story of Joseph and how he, even though he had been kidnapped and he was a slave in Egypt, he made his captor successful by providing food, not just for Egypt, for other countries that would come to get it. And that was grain. As a matter of fact, I think someone said that a scientist had found some of that grain in a tomb and planted it, and it grew the same kind of wheat. I thought that was pretty fascinating. So you can go through the Bible and find all the references you want to food and to an attitude towards food also. People fasted a lot when they were upset, but now when people are upset, they tend to eat something that they know they shouldn't eat. Whereas I think we used to kind of be off our food. We didn't want to eat. And one thing is, I noticed when we were growing up as kids, we were always hungry. We were always hungry, but I think we ran off our energy, ran off our any intake we had of food. We kind of ran it off pretty fast. But we discovered, if we could have a drink of water, it would take the hunger away for a little while. And sometimes we'd go forage in the garden and pick strawberries and eat them, or green peas, little green peas, and eat them. And my mother didn't mind because those were our snacks. And it was hard work, I think, for my mother to do all of that. But I think particularly at meal times, it's important to have a nice atmosphere at the table and not make people miserable by correcting them constantly at meal times, because you'll find if you're critical at meal times, people will stop eating, or some people will. Other people will overreact and just eat more, but a lot of times it affects people when they're criticized. It takes their appetite away. And of course, most people are worried about being too fat, and I think probably you can still, how long has it been since you really enjoyed the food that you enjoyed in your childhood? And so we're not enjoying food as much as we used to. But what I would suggest is, if you're afraid that food will ruin your health or make you fat, to just eat a bite of something that you like, or just eat half of what you would normally take. And that way you have some of it. Now I'd like to go on to, and someday I will do a video that's just all about food. I'd like to go to a book called The Thinking Toolbox here. And it's written by the same boys. They were brothers who wrote The Fallacy Detective that I talked about last time I was here. And it's called The Thinking Toolbox. And look, it's the color of the toolboxes, used to be two different colors of green. Do you remember that? I don't know what toolboxes look like now, but I remember that in the old days they always sold them, and I forget who put out those toolboxes. Do you remember those colors? Okay, so I will read how to use this book. All right. How to use this book. You can read this book by yourself, or you can read it with others. Many students say it helps to talk with others, students, about logic. There is something about logical discussions that can expand our mind and answer questions, but a group setting is not required. Now, one thing I learned from reading The Fallacy Detective, it just occurred to me that a lot of these things will not trick you or trip you up if you're not willing to believe everything that everyone says. Now, some people are just fascinated to listen to somebody, and they think, oh, that person has got something to tell me. That person is so smart, and they just gullibly and naively get sucked into this person, and they think that if they reject what that person says, or if they question it, that somehow they're rejecting the person, and so they don't want to say, they get sucked into things, they get sold things, they get pulled into lifestyles, they get pulled into, just changing their whole life because somebody convinced them through smooth talk. And it doesn't hurt to stop and think before you swallow everything. And so if you're not easily, this would not happen. We wouldn't have to have things like this if it wasn't for people being so naive and so gullible. But I suppose Adam was the same way, right? Tools for thinking. A thinking tool. Consider the following situation. Let's say your mother sent you to a drugstore to buy a bottle of aspirin. While you were walking home, a black van pulls up next to you. A guy with a beard leans out the window. Hey kid, you want a bag of candy? Here, Quick, get in the van and I'll take you for a ride. Don't worry, your mom said it was okay. And then you think, just a moment, let me think about it. How do I know you're telling me the truth? At this moment, you need to know whether you can trust the bearded man in the black van. Is he telling you the truth? Did your mom really say it was okay to go with him? Now, when we were little, back in the olden days, we were told never, ever, ever to ride in a car with anyone else but our parents. Did your mother really say it was okay to go with him? You need some tools. This book is like a toolbox. The book is full of different kinds of tools you can use for different thinking tasks. Just as you take a wrench out of a regular toolbox and use it to fix the sink, you can use the tools we give you in this book to solve thinking problems. A thinking tool will often take the form of a question. How do I know this person is trustworthy? Does he have a reason to lie? Are there two sides to this story? Which one should I believe? Thinking tools are very useful in solving many kinds of problems, from studying history to finding out why the family cow is sick and knowing whether to trust the bearded guy in the black van. The bearded guy. Come on, kid. Do you think I'd lie to you? You. Are you a primary source? Guy. Huh? You. I mean, do you see the events in question yourself or hear them from others? What about biases? Do you have a reason to lie? Guy. You. I mean, I did see you. Did you see the events? Guy. You. And other evidence. Do you have any corroborating evidence for what you say? Perhaps other witnesses or some circumstantial evidence? Guy. Who? You. So you admit that all you have is hearsay evidence and possibly reasoning? My daddy said I was not supposed to talk to strangers. Now the word hearsay, I believe we looked that up once, and I even said it in a video. And goodness, I forget what it was. It was a combination of several words. It was repeating something that you heard that wasn't true, I think. Goodness, I'll have to look that up. I don't know. I have had to look it up every time. That's the one I can't remember. Each lesson in this book will give you a thinking tool and will teach you how to use the tool. And by the time you finish the book, you'll have many tools in your thinking toolbox, such as how to list reasons to believe something, how to analyze opposing viewpoints, examining evidence and sources, brainstorming, the scientific method. However, the tool we should learn in this lesson is probably one which I am sure your mother and father have already taught you. And that is, just because somebody tells you something, that doesn't mean it's true. Now, this is a problem with older people too, and that is somebody will come along with a religious belief and tell you something, and you won't say, I better talk to so-and-so about it or somebody else about it, because they have sat down with you with eye contact, or maybe stood on the sidewalk with you and talked to you with eye contact, and they've sucked you in and you didn't realize it. So, or maybe you've gotten on the web and you've found a religious belief that people have warned you about, or causes you to reject your friends and family, and but it has sucked your mind in, and that is a big problem. You, wait a second, I guess I will get in the car. Where do you want to go? The bearded guy, what? No, you don't want to get in here. You're not supposed to trust strangers. Your father told you many times not to trust strangers. You, that's right, but I think it's okay to trust this one. Dad, bearded guy, what? What gave me away? It was the beard. It's the same one you used in the Christmas plate. Dad, did I fool you a little while? You, no, but it sure gave me a chance to try out the tools I've been learning in the thinking toolbox. Dad, I'd say you deserve some ice cream for cracking this case. You, it sounds good. Now, somebody did that to me once. I had just begun homeschooling. I was very young, still in my 20s, back in the olden days. And I had been reading something from the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, was printed in a homeschool magazine, on how to answer public officials so that you don't get yourself in trouble, you know. And they will say something like, I understand you not putting your kids in school. Do you realize you're violating section such and such of the law and everything? And then we would learn exactly what the law said, and we would be able to answer, actually, that law says this. It doesn't say what you say it is. And somebody caught me off guard. And I had discussed this. I'd read the article and everything. And I was so busy with the children and busy with the homemaking and busy with church and busy with everything. It was a little bit off. And someone called me up and said, and disguised their voice, and said, I understand that you have illegally begun to homeschool your children. Did you know it's against the law? And of course, it wasn't any kind of official, and goodness, I didn't know who it was, but I started to defend myself, and I'd say, well, the law says it's okay, and the law says this, and the law says that. And the mistake that I made, and later on they revealed who they were, and she said, the mistake that you made was you started talking. You don't want to talk and give away all of your defenses. Don't say anything. Just say, if you'd like to have an appointment with me, I can get my lawyer to be there, my homeschool defense lawyer to be there, and we can talk about it. But instead, I was just giving all this information and giving it away, and it gave them more fuel to overcome, ways to overcome it. So this is just some things you need to know. Exercises. A. For each of the following quotes, say whether you would trust the person, what the person is saying. Number 1, the librarian. It says here in the Australian Guide to Poisonous Snakes that the Australian death adder is easily recognized by its triangular-shaped head, short, stout body, and thin tail. It says death adders have a toxic venom. Before the introduction of antivenom, about 60% of bites to humans were fatal. It says that if you are bitten by a death adder, you should seek medical attention immediately. So, number 2, man next to you on a plane. I read somewhere in a book that the Australian death adder isn't really as dangerous as they make it out to be. I read that if you ever get bit by one, all you have to do is drink a quart of lemon juice. The acid will kill the venom. It's true because I read it in a book written by somebody who was an authority on how to treat poisonous snake bites. 3, Australian bushman. It's a nasty snake. They call it the Australian death adder. I wouldn't touch it if I were you. Very poisonous. I was bit by one once. They nearly had to take my leg off at the knee. 4, your mortal enemy. Don't believe them. It isn't an Australian death adder. It's just an eastern tiger snake. They're perfectly harmless. I would know. I'm an expert on Australian snakes. You can pick it up if you like. 5, Australian Guide to Poisonous Snakes. The eastern tiger snake inhabits the southern portion of Africa. The venom of an eastern tiger snake is of no consequence to humans, but they will strike readily when provoked. B. 6. Which of the following person does not agree with the other two? Fred. I think we're lost. I think we're going in circles. We've been traveling in this Brazilian jungle for a week, and I keep seeing the same scenery. Durf. We're not lost. The jungle books look the same no matter where you go. The jungle looks the same no matter where you go. Besides, we've been floating downstream on this river. Rivers don't go in circles. If we just keep floating, we'll end up in Cairo, just like the guidebook, I suppose. Inrod. I don't know about that. I've been looking at the guidebook, and it says Cairo is in Egypt. Besides, all the signs I have been seen are printed in Arabic. I don't think we're in the Brazilian jungle anymore. I think we're lost. Anyway, it goes on and on to help you decide how to have a thinking skill that is logical. For example, I have told you about this before, that for instance, I don't think that the Australian snake is poisonous because I had a friend, and whenever you hear somebody say, well, I had a friend that believed this, or I had a friend who was in this cult, or I know somebody and she's just a very humble, nice person, and therefore this is the right religion, sort of speak. So I want to talk to you a little bit today also about refined speech for Christian women. And I'm going to read it from my own article, which was written in 2007. back in the olden days. I have been here on the web since '05, I think, 2005. And every time I wrote something like this, something to do with refinement or something to do with etiquette, by whole way, I hope you're getting a lot done while you listen. Every time I had an article like this, the trolls would just shriek and cast just dust in the air and just go crazy and over it.